let's just jump right in. There's this claim you hear all the time, a number so big it just seems to shut down the whole conversation. Well, today we're going to tackle that claim head on, but we're going to use a pretty unexpected story from history to get some clarity.
And there it is, 40,000. I mean, it's just a massive, staggering number, right? And when you apply it to Christian denominations, it's meant to sound like total chaos, like a complete and utter failure of unity.
And this is the punchline that number is supposed to deliver. It's a pretty powerful critique, you have to admit. The argument is simple. Hey, if the instruction manual was clear, you wouldn't have this many different versions. But you know, that argument only really works if you don't slow down and actually look at what's going on.
So let's do that. Let's slow down and put this number in context and see what it really, truly represents.
Okay, so what even is a denomination in this context? Well, it turns out that 40,000 number is mostly just counting separate legal entities. So think of it like this. A Baptist church in Texas and a Baptist church in, say, Kenya might get counted as two different denominations, even if they believe the exact same things, word for word. It's much more about paperwork and bureaucracy than it is about fundamental beliefs.
So this is absolutely crucial. We have to be really clear about what this division is not. There are not 40,000 different Bibles floating around.
And there aren't 40,000 different Jesuses at the heart of the whole thing.
And no, there aren't 40,000 totally different ways of understanding salvation being taught. What we have is one core text being interpreted by millions of human beings across different cultures, different centuries, and different languages. And you know that little distinction? It changes everything.
Now, to really get a grip on this, we're going to pivot to a really powerful analogy. Let's talk about the sinking of the Titanic. And this just nails the point, doesn't it? If someone told you there were thousands of eyewitness reports about the Titanic, your first thought would be chaos. How could you possibly know what really happened? But here's the thing. All that disagreement doesn't change the one central, undeniable truth. The ship sank. The core event is not up for debate.
You see, for decades, there was this fierce debate over how it sank. The eyewitnesses were totally split. Some people swore on their lives they saw the ship break in half before going under, and others were just as certain that it went down in one single piece.
And this was not some tiny disagreement, okay? Survivors directly contradicted each other. Experts and engineers literally wrote entire books defending completely opposite conclusions. This debate raged for over 70 years, filled with accounts that seemed impossible to reconcile.
But then, something changed. New evidence came to light that could finally, once and for all, settle the debate.
So in 1912, the ship goes down. For the next 73 years, the story is just defined by this chaos of conflicting reports. But then in 1985, Dr. Robert Ballard and his team finally find the wreck, 2.5 miles down at the bottom of the Atlantic.
And just like that, the truth was suddenly undeniably clear. The ship did split in two. All the arguing, all the books, all the disagreement, it was settled in that one moment of discovery.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, the disagreement among the eyewitnesses didn't mean the ship never sank. The contradictions didn't mean the event was fake. It just meant that human beings, under the most extreme stress you can imagine, from different limited vantage points, were all trying their best to describe the same single, overwhelming reality.
Okay, so let's bring this all the way back to our original question about 40,000 denominations, because it turns out this works the exact same way.
Despite all that apparent division, if you actually look across the major traditions, we're talking Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, you find this incredible, rock-solid spine of agreement. And these aren't small details, okay? This is the entire foundation of the whole worldview. And on these points, there is stunning unity.
So, where do they disagree?
Well, it happens in areas like how a church should be run, or what the worship music should sound like, or debating timelines for future events. In other words, to use our analogy, they're arguing about how the ship's crew was organized, not whether the ship sailed or sank in the first place.
And this brings us to one last, really important idea, a way to reframe what all this disagreement actually means.
What if disagreement isn't a sign of failure at all? What if it's an expected, maybe even a necessary feature when human beings try to wrap their minds around a deep, complex truth? I mean, if a truth is big enough, it's going to invite questions and interpretation and, disagreement.
Think about it like this. A violin is infinitely harder to play than a kazoo, right? But that doesn't make music any less real.
A legal system is way more complex than a children's rulebook, but that doesn't mean justice is imaginary. Complexity doesn't disprove truth. A lot of the time, it just confirms how deep it really is.
So this flips the whole question on its head. Maybe the question isn't, why do Christians disagree so much? Maybe the real, much more interesting question is this: why do they agree so much? Why is there such a profound, unified agreement on these core, world-changing claims? Claims that were often dangerous to believe and incredibly costly to hold across so many different centuries and cultures. Now that's not a story of failure. That's a story worth digging into.